I'm gonna start over though, because I'll probably cut this out. Okay, it's Thursday night, Cholent. We don't have Cholent, we have latkes and sufganiyot for Chanukah. We're learning a special Chanukah edition of the Thursday night Cholent. We'll say for Sise Laila from Tzadok HaKohen from Lublin. He was a Tzadok HaKohen Rabinowitz, who was he was a Talmud of the Ishbitzer, the Mea Shaloyach, who in turn was a Talmud of the Kotzker. You mentioned that we did a lot of Kotzk recently. Yeah. Thinking also of the Gerer Rebbe, the Sfas Emes was Kotzk. And did we do anything else that was Kotzk derivatives? I think that was probably what we did. And okay, so Reb Tzadok was a Litvak, and he became a Chassid. Not only became a Chassid, he became a Rebbe. Actually, I think most of his life he would not take a Rabbanus. He had a used clothing store, for whatever that's worth. Interesting information. He was a very, very prolific writer. One of his Sfarim is Sise Laila, we're going to learn from tonight. It's interesting, by the way, Rabbi Yoel Kahn, Olav Shalom, was speaking about working on the Sichas, on the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Sichas. And one of the examples he gave of the Rebbe's memory, he said that once there was a Sicha that the edited version of the Sicha, the Rebbe wrote in a quote from Reb Tzadok, from Sise Laila. Actually, it's not Sise Laila, there's a Haisaf on the back of Sise Laila that is published with it. And but anyways, over there, Reb Tzadok's talking about the Indian of a birthday, of a Yom Haledis. And so the Rebbe wrote in the edited version of the Sicha, here's the quote, and the Rebbe told Reb Yoel, I'm not sure this is exactly the quote, so just look it up and make sure it's correct. And Reb Yoel said he looked it up and it was like word for word. And he was saying that shows you the Bekiyas of the Rebbe, because Reb Tzadok is fairly new stuff. It's not like somebody's quoting Shas or Medrash Baal Peh, the classics. This is, Reb Tzadok passed away in 1900. I think he was born 1823 and passed away 1900. So, and in case those people out there who like Hasidic trivia, the Sicha that Rabbi Yoel was talking about is Chelik Hey of Lakutei Sichas, and the Sicha is entitled Chof Mar Cheshvan. It starts with the story about the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab's birthday was Chof Cheshvan. And it's a story about when he was a little boy. He came home from Cheder and he was crying about wanting Hashem to reveal himself to him like Hashem revealed himself to Avram. Anyways, so that's Reb Tzadok, Sise Laila, and we're going to learn from, we're not going to cover it all, but we're going to learn from, where's page one? Why am I missing 165? Did I take this packet? Okay. What did I do with my paper? Oh, here it is. I found my missing paper. There's another packet. Okay. All right. So page 165 starts Perek Nun Zayin. We're not going to learn the whole Perek, but it's very interesting stuff. Maybe we'll learn. Maybe we'll jump around. Let's see. Okay. So Inyan Mitzvahs Ner Chanukah. We're gonna later on when we upload this to Soul Words. I know people are watching this on YouTube, people watching this on Torah Anytime. If you want to get the full features, if you want the PDF, you go to soulwords.org, and there should be a study guide underneath the video player. It should be like a little clickable thing where it says download the study guide, and you'll get a PDF of exactly this page that we are reading from here. Okay. All right. Inyan mitzvahs ner Chanukah lezecher nes de Chanukah. What's the concept? What's the idea of lighting the menorah to commemorate the miracle of Chanukah? Tzadok asks a question. It's a strange thing that became the way that we commemorate Chanukah. Ube'emes ikra neis haya hatzalasim shmada yavonim. The main miracle actually had nothing to do with oil. That was after the fact, discovering the oil. But really it was that we were rescued from the Hellenistic attempt to assimilate the Jewish people. V'hanes de shemen zahoya achakach inyan b'fnei atzmei. The miracle with the oil happened afterward, and it's really its own story. It's sort of almost an epilogue to the main story. The l'chayra ein loy shayches laguf Yeshuas ha'atzola shuhu ha'ikar, and it really has no connection to the main story. Yeah.
It's only 2 words.
So he said that's exactly what he's about to say. Because in the Alanisim, it doesn't even mention the nace. It mentions that they lit the menorah, right?
It's all about the Muhammad.
It's all about the Muhammad. It's about the defeating the odds and about the small over the great. Exactly what he says. Ubanusach al exactly. Ubanusach al hanisim loy nizkir klal neiseh shahaya b'shemen. It doesn't mention the miracle. It mentions that they lit the menorah. It doesn't mention a miracle of 1 day's worth of oil that lit for 8 days. It doesn't say it in V'yala Nisim. Rak da'achakach, what does it mention? That after they were victorious with the battle, and that's what it speaks about at length, they were victorious militarily. After that, bo chulu v'adliku nedus, that afterwards they lit the candle. It doesn't even say that there was a miracle involved in that. Okay? So it's funny that we end up with the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, that the story really isn't mainly about that, and yet that's what we get. What do we get from it? For all these centuries and millennia, we get the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. So we want to understand why the mitzvah that we do seems to be so tangential to the main story of Chanukah. Okay. So now he explains a little bit that you need to have something. You need to have some type of act. Aval kol Yeshua shenikma b'mena zeichel adoros. Any salvation of the Jews that becomes commemorated for all generations. Shekvar noishu hanafashis di Yisrael ba'esei inyan shahoyu lahem ezech sarin ma. He explains that when we commemorate the salvation of the Jews, what are we commemorating? We're commemorating that there was some type of spiritual deficiency that was the source of the problems. The problems were a manifestation of an inner deficiency within the Jews, and that got cleared up. But there was an inner deficiency. The machmason hoya hagzeris vatzaris mikaydam, that what caused in this case, evil decrees, but the oppression, what caused the threat to Jewish safety was an outer manifestation of inner spiritual stuff that we needed to fix. The hakel b'mishpat, all of this stuff is sort of cause and effect, that there's inner stuff that we have to do, and therefore there becomes an outer representation of that, and then we fix the inner stuff. Sometimes we call it the kitrig lamaila. We fix whatever is going on in the heavenly court, and then everything down here on the terrestrial plane clears up as well. So when the Jews clear up the issue that's going on in their hearts, the internal issue, they get saved from the problem, from the threat. Okay, so we're understanding a little bit better, or we're on our way to understanding a little bit better what exactly happened. Okay, we understand that there was a military victory, but why did there need to be a military victory? There needed to be a military victory because we were under threat. And why we were under threat? Not because the Greeks one day decided to oppress us, but because there was something internally that Jews needed to work on. And we successfully worked on it. And since we successfully worked on it in a sort of permanent way, what he's saying here is that when sometimes there's a microcosmic victory, sometimes there's a macrocosmic victory, sometimes there's an individual, and sometimes there's the whole Klal Yisrael has a breakthrough. And that breakthrough has permanent effects for the good. And when we commemorate something eternally for all generations, what do we commemorate? Why do we still commemorate it? Because we are reaping the eternal benefits of that breakthrough that they had at that time. That's what he's saying. Okay. Why is this connected to lighting a menorah? We still don't know. We don't know that yet. Okay. V'kasher tiknu legamri oisei inyan ad hasherish shel klalis knesset Yisrael. When the source within the Jews is fixed, be'inyan shmahayim va'allah kol nefashis de b'nei Yisrael heim mesukonim b'prat zeh, in such a way that from now on, for all time forward, the Jews are going to be relieved of that issue. That issue was cleared up in that time, and now, Baruch Hashem, it's behind us. We fixed it then. So then what do? When you have a permanent victory, when there was an issue that was plaguing us and then we got it behind us, we cleared it up and we moved on. So then Nikba Yeshuazu Zeichel Adoros, that salvation becomes established as an eternal celebration, something that you commemorate forever. Why are we commemorating it forever? Because it's not just that something cool really happened one time, it's that something cool happened which is benefiting us, has been benefiting us all along since then, and continues to benefit us now. Okay. What is it? We don't know yet, but we're getting closer. Okay. V'kavu eze, we're going to flip the page. V'kavu eze mitzvah liyes lisarusa de lasata ba'ese zman lahamshich aleim kedushas tikun zeh. Now, when you want to reap the benefits, when you want to sort of tap into and be aligned with the breakthrough that happened and that we're benefiting from. So what you do is you need some type of a physical action, something tangible that you can do. It can't just be passive. It can't just be, well, this is a special time. It is a special time, and there's a special energy in the world, the energy of the breakthrough that happened in the times of Chanukah that's available every year at this time, but we need to harness it. So how do we harness it? You have to have some type of an action that you can do, what he calls here an isarusa de lasato, an arousal from below. There's an arousal from above happening anyway, but we need some type of arousal from below. We need some type of an action to harness it. Okay. The kol davar shal kedusha ein bo ba'atzme lelev ela ayidei eze isarus de lasato. Any holiness will not enter unilaterally on its own into the heart. It'll sort of be out there, it'll be in the ether, but to enter the heart, to move the individual, there has to be some action from the person himself. Or like we say, psicha kechudesh al machat, if you open up like the eye of a needle, and often the famous rest of the Vort, which Tzadok doesn't bring. If you open for me, Hashem says, like the eye of a needle, I'll open up for you like the corridor of the hall of the Beis Pischei Shel Ulam. At any rate, the point is that there has to be some type of action on our part. Yeah. What does it say? Milmata. V'kovu mitzvah haroi. So the sages set up a mitzvah that would be appropriate lepsichas oisei ha'or v'akdusha b'leiv, for opening ourselves up to have that particular holiness enter our hearts. Okay, so we still don't understand why the menorah was specifically chosen, but we do understand that there needs to be some act that is a good tool or technology for harnessing the particular spiritual energy which is available at any given time. And for whatever reason, lighting the menorah is the right technology for harnessing the energy that is unique to Chanukah. Now, what is the energy that's unique to Chanukah? We didn't say yet, but we did say it was something that once it was achieved, it was a permanent accomplishment and that we reap the benefits from it until today. Okay. So let's continue here. V'yadua mitama Arizal de Matisyo tikena haid. The Arizal says, what did Matisyo do, the head of the Maccabees? He fixed Hoid. Hoid is one of the spheroids. You have Chochmah Bina Das, which are the intellectual spheroids, or actually maybe I should say, because Reb Tzadok is going to refer to Keser as the first sphere. You know, there's that different ways of enumerating the spheroids. So if you say Keser, Chochmah, Bina, then you don't say Das. But at any rate, you have the Gimel Rishonis, the first three, and then you have the seven lower spheroids, which are Chesed, Gvura, Tferes, Netzach, Haid. Haid we're going to talk about, Yesod, Malchus. We'll also talk about Yesod and Malchus if we get that far. I don't know. We'll see if we get that far. But Matisyo fixed something that was damaged in Haid. Shahaya mikaydim haidi nepach olai lemashchis. This is a pasuk from Daniel, from the book of Daniel. Haidi nepach olai lemashchis. Daniel is describing this great state of fear that he's having from this vision of the Jews in future exiles. Of course, he's in exile in Bavel, but he is seeing future exiles, and it's terrifying him. So he's describing losing control of his faculties, and he describes it as Hoidi nepach olai lemashchis. Reb Tzadok says in brackets here, Mikra zeh amor b'Daniel Yud. It says it in chapter 10 of the book of Daniel. I believe it's Pasuk Ches. I think it's Daniel chapter 10, verse 8. Those online can go check that up. And those who have this old technology called a Sefer, they could also check. They could also check it. I gave you the actual chapter and verse, so you could go look it up in any book of Daniel. Okay. Kasher nizgala loy, when this was revealed to him, dehine sar yoven bo ayin sham. He saw the future Greek exile, the persecution that the Jews would suffer at the hands of the Greeks, of the Hellenists, the Yavonim. And he describes that as hoidi. Hoidi means my hoid. However you want to translate hoid, sometimes they translate it as majesty. I don't know if that means anything, or glory, or splendor. Splendor, what is splendor? So isn't that a sweetener? Splenda. So hoidi, yeah. We're going to say that hoid is also related to the word hoidah, which means gratitude, humble gratitude, which is probably a better, not a literal translation of hoid, but probably a more functional translation would be humble gratitude. Okay. So anyways, Daniel foresees the Greek persecution of the Jews, and he refers to it as like a dysfunction in the sphera of Hoid, in the faculty of Hoid. And Matisyo came and he fixed the dysfunction in the sphera of Hoid, whatever that means, we don't know yet. Al kain tiknu al hanisim beheidah. That's why when we celebrate Chanukah, when we celebrate that the Hoid was fixed, we say V'yala Nisim, which is a way of giving Hoidah. Hoidah is humble gratitude, but Hoidah is also related to the word Hoid. V'al kein heim ches yomim. And that's why Chanukah lasts for 8 days. Ki Hoid hu sfira ches, because Hoid is the 8th Sphira.
You'll say Alanisim on Maidim in the part of Shmonesri.
And we say it right. We say V'alanisim in the bracha of Maidim, which is about Haidah. That's right. And by the way, in benching, it's funny because in Shemini Esrei it's late, so you have time. Like in the middle of Shemini Esrei, like, oh, did I miss V'alanisim? No, it's later. But benching, it creeps right up on you, because where in benching, where do you say?
Also by his
Neidelecha, right? Neidelecha is also is Haida or Toida. So, and that's earlier in benching, right? So it's not about if it's earlier or it's later. It's the context of where you mention Haida. So wherever you say Haida, that's where you say Yala Nisim. And we know here, the Tzadok is telling us Kabbalistically that's because Hoid was damaged and Hoid got fixed. And Hoid is the 8th Sphira, and that's why Chanukah is 8 days, right? The 8th Sphira. He says he counts from Kesser. Mamshichim al Yedei Hadlokas Haneris Law Oir Meches Sphiris Hakoidmois Ad HaKesser, right? He says until Kesser. So Kesser, Chochma Bina, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hoid. 8. I feel like the count from Sesame Street. Okay. All right. We still don't know what this means. Like, tell us what is the real issue here. Ubirze Kiyadua the Netzach v'Heid. Netzach and Hoid go together. You never really hear about a Hoid by itself. It goes with Netzach. Netzach is on the right side, on the right axis, Kava Yamin, and the Hoid is on the Kava small, but they're mirror images of each other. And anatomically, when we speak about the spheroids in terms of the image of a body, like in Pasach Eliyahu, when we speak about the spheroids in terms of anatomy, right, where we say Chesed Draya Yamina, that Chesed, kindness, is the right arm, and Gvura Draya Smola, restraint or strength, discipline, is the left arm, and Tiferes is Gufa. Tiferes is the body, the torso. What's Netzach and Hoid? So he says Netzach and Hoid, Heim train Yerchin I train Beyin, the Tchura. They are either referred to as the 2 thighs, because they're beneath the torso, lower than Tiferes. So they're called the Shoikin, in Pasach Eliyahu, that's what he calls them, which are the thighs, or they're called the 2 Beyin Didchura, the 2 male reproductive organs. And what does that mean spiritually? Well, not just spiritually, biologically as well. What does it mean spiritually and biologically? The biological comes from the spiritual. We learned yesterday in the Tanya Chitas that the reason we have Eser Koiches Nefesh is because it's nishtalshel. It derives from the Eser Spherois. And in turn, it doesn't say that over there in yesterday's Tanya, Perek Gimel of Likutei Amorim, but it says elsewhere in Chassidus that the reason that the body, the physical body, is the way that it is because that in turn is a manifestation of the configuration of the Koiches Nefesh, which in turn is a manifestation of Hashem's Spherois. So the way that these two body parts work is that. By the way, I'm being careful not to. I'm not sure if I'm censoring what words I'm using because I'm uploading it to Torah Anytime, or because I don't want YouTube to think I'm the wrong kind of channel. But not sure which one I'm more concerned about. But at any rate, yeah. So, but anyone who knows what Trein Beyin de Dchura means, it could figure it out. So, what is their function? They are koiches hashpa lahazulas. In other words, their purpose is to prepare something that's to be given over, reproductively speaking. Just talking about it, begashmius. that the purpose, the function of these body parts is to prepare the genetic material that the father will give over to the mother to gestate for 9 months in the mother's womb. And you could describe it also in terms of emotional or cognitive functions, like a teacher, for instance, who's preparing a lesson. So there's how the teacher processes it in his own cognition and his own feelings about the subject, his own love, his own awe. But then the Netzach and Hoid is just before the transmission, just before I give it over, I have to attenuate, I have to mix and match and make sure that the right formula, the right combination is struck before I give it over. So it's like the last adjustments before something is given over. That's why sometimes it's helpful to think of Chesed and Gvura as emotions and Netzach and Hoid as attitudes. Because an emotion is more something, it's more pure. It's more my actual feeling about this concept. Attitude is more, how should I approach it? It's more adjusting how do I go in for a landing? How do I actually get involved in this thing? An orientation, maybe even, you might call it. So, Netzach and Hoid represent the Koiches HaHashpah. V'shom hoye negias sarei shel Esav b'Yankiv Avinu olav v'shalom. Now, when Esav, or Esav's malach, his sar, his ministering angel, wrestled with Yankov Avinu, where did Yankov get injured? He got injured on the socket of his hip, which damaged his sciatic nerve, and we have the prohibition of the Gid Anosha from that story. But Tzadok says something here interesting, that the ministering angel of Esav, he damaged the hip socket. Ki lo yochel lo latzmusei. He couldn't have any dominion over the essence, meaning the more internal faculties. Shekulei emes umitase shlema. Because we know about Yankov Avinu that he was totally emes. Remember a couple of weeks ago we read from the Balatanya. He said midase shel Yankov is emes. Spoke about that. Anyways, Yankov is emes, Tiferes is emes, and mitase shlema, which means that mito means the bed. His intimate life was perfect. What does that mean? His intimate life was perfect. That from his intimate unions with his wives came only tzaddikim, not like Avram who had a Yishmael, or like Yitzchak who had an Esav. So mitase shlema, his intimate life was perfect. Ve'ein by psilas klal, he didn't have any negative derivatives like the aforementioned Yishmael who was Chesed de Klippa, or Esav who was Gvura de Klippa. Right, Avram was Chesed, and the psilas of Chesed, the Chesed de Klippa was Yishmael, and Yitzchak was Gvura, and the psilas of Gvura is Gvura de Klippa, which is Esav, combativeness, warlike aggression. But Yankov is Tiferes, which is also called emes, because it's consistency, it's harmony, it's truth has an act to be consistent. It's always the same. Mark Twain said, if you never lie, you never have to remember anything. Okay, something that's a lie works one place, doesn't work the other place. The truth is always the truth. So Yankov is truth. Esav couldn't damage the essence of Yankov, but he was able to put a little bit of damage on him on a superficial level. He hit him in the joint, the ball and socket joint of the thigh. What we're saying is that's equivalent to, remember we were saying before that Netzach and Hoid are called, each one is called a thigh. So Netzach and Hoid are sort of the outer spheres. It's not the actual essence. They're what do I mean when I say they're outer spheres? They're close already to the delivery, to the outer form. So that's all that the sar could damage. V'isa b'bereishis rabba, seif perik, probably perik. Sometimes they translate as parsha, but it makes more sense to say perik. Seif perik ayin zayin, chapter 77 of Bereishis Rabba. It says, "Betzadikim v'tzidkonius neviim and neviyos sheyatzu mimenu ve'eza zedere shel shmad." Talks about. I actually looked up this medrash over here, and it is at the end of Perek Ayin Zayin of Bereishis Rabba. He says over here, it's talking about Yankov wrestling with Sareh shel Esav, and it's talking about the Jewish people remaining unassimilated, specifically not succumbing to intermarrying with the nations among whom they're exiled. So it says, Im yovayu umasailim lizdavig liYisrael yema lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu sarchem lo yahayu yachol lamed bay. If the nations of the world try to cause the Jews to assimilate through intermarriage, we'll be able to say to them, your ministering angel could not defeat us. Yeah. And you're trying to cause us to assimilate through intermarriage. And he, that's what the verse says, the ministering angel of Esav touched, meaning damaged Yankov's thigh. This is the quote that Tzadok brings, that he struck the righteous men and women, the prophets and the prophetesses, shehein asidin lamed mimeno, which would in the future come from, meaning be descended from Yankov. Ve'ezeh doirei shel shmad. And who are these tzadikim, tzidkonios, and neviim and neviyos? These are the great valiant martyrs of the era of persecution. Historically, there's an era of persecution, and it began with, Tzadok says a few lines from now, it began with the Hellenist movement or conquest. Yeah, let's look back inside here. Lost my place. Okay. He says right here that the era of persecution, oppression, which really we equate with the Romans, but the Tzadok says it really started from the Greeks. The Greeks are a little bit before the Romans. Kvar poske nevuah miYisrael. Now, at that point, there was no more prophecy. It was the end of the era of prophecy. Aval afal pi she'enon neviim b'nei neviim heim, but they weren't full-fledged prophets. They were like junior prophets, prophets in training. He says to go look in the Gemara in Pesachim. V'yesh b'hem koyach ha'nevuah, and they had prophetic power. Why? Ki maha yerchin netzach v'hoid, because from the thighs, which are netzach and hoid, sham yenikas ha'neviim, that's where nevuah comes from. Nevuah comes from netzach and hoid. Ki yadua, like it's known. And actually, it speaks about this in many places. There's a whole long letter in Igeres HaKodesh from the Alter Rebbe in Tanya that speaks about this, that nevuah is from netzach and hoid. Va'al kein korem kan neviim. That's why they're referred to as neviim, because they have this connection to netzach and hoid. Not that they were real full-fledged prophets, but they had a connection to netzach and hoid, meaning, as the Tzadok's going to explain, maybe I'm going to start to summarize because we're getting late, and I want to jump ahead to another part. But basically, this idea of preserving their integrity in terms of not assimilating, specifically through marriage, which is the idea of Netzach and Hod, which are the Koiches HaHashpah, which are meant for Leida, which are meant for reproduction, and they're not to be misappropriated for other purposes. So maybe I'll jump ahead here. He speaks about, and I want to, there's a few in. I hate to do this, but let's jump ahead a few pages to page 168. Look here at the beginning. There's a sub-chapter here. This is still within the same mimer, which is mimer Nun Zayin, or Perek Nun Zayin, that we started at the beginning. Yeah. But there's a sub-chapter here on page 168. V'tchilos hiseridus ha'chashmoinim, chashmanoim, k'fi ma sha'omrim b'yetzer l'Chanukah. The first, there's different histories of why the Hashmonai got involved, why they took up this battle. But there, in the Yotzer, which is the poem, the liturgy that's written about it, it says Hoya al zeh shaloi tivol achesim lehegmein, that the officer, they used to have a thing that the head of the military governor in any area would have first rights with any kala, and the doctrine of prima nocta. So the Hashmonai would not allow their sister to be taken in such a way, and Tzadok mentions, this is also mentioned in Gemara, not explicitly in Gemara, but in Pirush Rashi on Gemara. V'gam Rashi b'Shabbos Chav Gimel. That's the sugya that talks about in Gemara about Chanukah. So there on Daf Chav Gimel Omed Aleph of Gemara Shabbos. Al Sha'af Hein Hayu Ba'esei Nes. Why are women included in the miracle of Chanukah or the celebration of Chanukah? Because they were part of the miracle of Chanukah, and what was their inclusion in the miracle is, well, their inclusion in the oppression, unfortunately. Pirish b'gzera d'tivo lehegmein shezahaya iker neis de Chanukah levatel erov v'chibur zeh. Very strong language. Tzadok says the main nes. Before he said it was the military victory, but now he spells it out more explicitly. Why was the military victory so important? Because if you remember, the Hellenists did not initially want to conquer us, at least not in the classical sense of conquest. They were okay with us being culturally colonized and paying, obviously, our tribute and our taxes, but they weren't going to force us to be quote unquote second-class citizens. They were very enlightened, very civilized. They would let us be one with them. That was the whole pitch that they were making. Come on and mix with us, intermingle with us, specifically through the lure of intermarriage. So the Tzadok says the main miracle was that we didn't allow this, that we didn't allow the commingling, the spiritual holocaust of allowing a seemingly enlightened, oppressive entity to invite us to dilute ourselves, to lose our identity by marriage with them. He says an interesting thing here. Al kain k'shaba hurdus ledabik bezarom. There's a whole story at the beginning of Bava Basra, a wild story, actually, interesting. I got it to there in the beginning of the Masechta. But Hurdus was a slave from the house of Hashmonai. When he tried to become when he tried to marry into the Hasmoneans, he was not successful. Bava Basra talks about in the beginning of of that Gemara. Kizeh kol sheirish kedushas hachashmonaim hamispashet b'chol zaram achareihem. That is the essence of the holiness of the Hasmoneans, which lasts forever. What is it? Tzadok characterizes the unique holiness of the Hasmoneans as the preservation of the integrity of marriage. So now we're getting a little bit closer to understanding what is the unique character of Chanukah. Burning a candle, what does it have to do with burning it? Because of oil? Oil was an epilogue to the story. The main story was a war, but what was the war over? What did they fight the war over? Because remember, if we would have intermarried with them, we wouldn't have had to fight a war. So what was the war over? It was about the preservation of the sanctity of Jewish marriage. Very interesting. And I'm going to summarize here, but he connects that with Netzach and Hod, which are the Keiches Hashba. He also connects it with the idea of Yesod. We know that according to Kabbalah, Yosef is Yesod. Yosef HaTzadik, Tzadik Yesod Olam. And he talks about the fact that Chanukah is in the weeks of Vayeshev and Miketz, which is all about Yosef, and Yosef, how he protected his sanctity, especially when he was tested with Ashes Potiphar. And all of these things are interconnected. It's all one theme. Okay. So much beautiful stuff here. I think I want to just look at one more thing. So much wonderful things here. Maybe let's look on page 170. Yeah, let's look on page 170. The first full sentence on 170. He's just finished speaking about Yosef and about Yosef's moral fortitude and how that's connected to Chanukah. Okay. V'davar zehu bisgalus bepoil. He's talking about this sanctification of intimacy. Ki yadua midei shel shmad, like we know about, again, he's speaking about the generation of Greek and Roman oppression. Harbe Paisha Yisrael. Yeah. Harbe Paisha Yisrael. You don't see that Rosh Tevis that often. Pei Vav Yud, Paisha Yisrael. The wanton sinners, meaning people who are deliberately not religious. Harbe Paisha Yisrael V'Rekim, and empty people, people who are religiously empty. Shamasru Atzum Al Kiddush Hashem. They chose to die as Jews. They chose to die as Jews. It's interesting in Tanya, he mentions how Perek Yud Ches, the peculiarity of the Jewish soul, that to say religious Jews died for the religion is not a chiddush. Every religion has religious people who die for the religion. But what's weird about Jews is you have so many instances historically of irreligious people who died for the religion. How do you explain that? And here again, he spells it out. What were they Moshe Nefesh for? What did they give their lives for? They didn't want to be assimilated. V'alkein, therefore, neis di Purim niten lichtayf. The miracle of Purim was allowed to be written. This is a Gemara in Yuma. It talks about why Esther is called Shachar, why she's called morning or dawn. Because like the dawn is the end of the night, Purim is the end of the era of writing our miracles. If you think about it historically, Megillas Esther, story of Purim, is the last national miracle, wholesale national miracle that we commemorate eternally. There's a mitzvah for it, and it's written, officially written. It's canon. like the Star Wars fans say. It's canon. By the way, Star Wars fans always talk about, is it canon? Canon is a biblical term. And so, is it canon? Canon. This is a whole interesting topic. We should have a whole class on this another time. But there are Sforim which are contemporaneous to the Nach, which are not, to use the proper term, canonical. I believe that is the correct pronunciation. Canonical. They are not canonical. In fact, we're in the Mishnah in Sanhedrin when it says Kol Yisrael Yeshim L'Chelik Le'Olam Haba, and then it talks about people who are jeopardizing their portion in the world to come, and says people who learn Sfarim Chitzainim. There's different interpretations of what those Sfarim Chitzainim mean. Some say it just means secular books, but one explanation is, I believe it's Rabbi Akiva. I have to look it up. Haven't looked it up recently. That say it means the. Now here I'll use a really academic term. I believe it's called deuterocanonical texts, or the apocrypha. Yeah, you're going to Google it for me? Yeah, Deutero means second, like Deuteronomy is Mishnah Torah. It's the second repeating of the Torah. So deuterocanonical texts, those are books that are contemporaneous with the Sforim of Nach, but they are decidedly not redacted. They are not part of the Sforim of Tanakh. And what's interesting is that in the Christian version, and there is no one Christian version, but in many of the Christian versions of the quote unquote Old Testament, many of these books were included. I'm sure we've heard of the Septuagint, which is at least the Torah portion of the Septuagint, meaning the Chumashim, the 5 books of Moses. That was translated by the 72 elders. The story was in the Gemara Megillah. The 72 elders who were locked in separate rooms. Ptolemy, the king, made them translate the Torah into Greek. So the Septuagint, at least the Chumash part of that, was written by those 72 elders, and that's the quote-unquote Old Testament in Greek. And the Nach part of it, I should say Lahavdil because it's not Nach, but that the pseudo Nach part of it includes many of these books which were decidedly rejected, not included by the Anshe Knesset Gedolah. And some of them are books about Chanukah. There's a scroll called Yehudis. There's a scroll or a book of Maccabees. In fact, I guess it's a very long book because there's a first book of Maccabees and a second book of Maccabees. These are not reliable books. These are not part of our canon. And going back to the Tzadok here, the last wholesale national miracle that we have that is recorded in an authentic biblical text is Purim. After Purim, that's it. There may have been wholesale national miracles, but they're no longer recorded in the Bible. Chanukah did not make the cut. Chanukah is after Purim, much later after Purim, and Chanukah is not in the Bible. Okay. So the Tzadok now explains a deeper explanation. Why Purim is in the Bible, why, to use the Gemara's term in Yuma, that it's nitin lichtoiv, it was given over, it was eligible to be written, whereas Chanukah cannot be written. V'hu soif kol anisim neged midas hayesoid u'malchus siyuma degufa. Purim is the end of the hashpah, which corresponds to Yesoid and Malchus, which are the end of the body, the reproductive organs. V'hu ha'chona l'neis de Chanukah. Purim precedes not only chronologically Chanukah, but Purim is the hachona, is the preparation. It primes things to be ready for there to be a Chanukah at a later date. Shehu levade Mahanisim shaloi nitnu lichteiv shenikbu ledoros. Hanukkah is funny. It is unique. Levade, he said, it is the only holiday, it is the only occurrence where you have a national miracle which is commemorated for all generations, but yet not written in any official canonical text. Like one or the other. If it was something that was only significant at the time and they stopped celebrating it after a few generations, I get it. Fine, it's not written. But here's something that we do continue to commemorate. Every Hanukkah, every year, we continue to commemorate it, but it doesn't have an official written recording. All those apocryphal texts notwithstanding. By the way, the word apocryphal is also with a small a. Apocryphal is like a story that, it's a good story. A Maisa Shahaya that wasn't really Shahaya, but it's a good story. So they call that apocryphal. But the apocrypha were these books that were not included in Tanakh. So it's interesting. Chanukah is the only national miracle you will find where it's significant enough to be commemorated forever, but not significant enough to be recorded in the Bible. Like one way or the other. I get it. If it's not enough to be in the Bible, fine. So then don't celebrate it forever. But if it's enough to celebrate it forever, how come it's not in the Bible? Like Purim. Purim's in the Bible. So he says like this. Ki hanisim shaloi nitnu lichtov. These miracles, the Hanukkah miracles, which do not lend themselves to be written. Ein lahem hisgalus b'poel adayin. They still haven't been fully revealed. You can't write the story because the story is not over. It's still happening. The full revelation of Hanukkah hasn't even yet come out, or at least 100 years ago when Tzadok was writing. The story of Hanukkah is still going on. It's too deep, it's too much to cap it off at any one point and to write it down and say, and that's the end of the story. The afsher shiyit buladeris ki'im biprat. You can only capture an aspect of it for being commemorated through the generations. Rak nes Chanukah hu klolos kol hanisim. This is such a beautiful concept here. In a way, Hanukkah isn't just about something that happened when the Maccabees fought the Greeks. Hanukkah is a catch-all for all, it's really beautiful, for all of the miracles, the Eis Hagolus, that happen in exile. Shaloi nitnu lichtov, which don't lend themselves to be written. They can't be written. Sheish by kvias ledoros, and yet they have eternal significance. Rak b'ha'aros ner. The only way you can capture it is with the glow of a flame. If you would try to write the story, you couldn't write the story because in a way, the story's still happening. What's the story? He's describing the integrity, the struggle to retain the integrity of our intimate lives, which is a miracle. The Jewish people's identity is a living miracle, a testimony to the integrity of our intimate lives. Because if all of our oppressors who tried to murder us didn't finish us off, assimilation should have, intermarriage should have. And you can bemoan what are the intermarriage rates. That's fine. You can look at it glass half empty. But let's look at it for a second. Let's marvel at the fact that we still exist, that after thousands of years in Golus, intermarriage didn't finish us off. So it's an ongoing miracle. That itself is, you can look at it pessimistically if you want. And of course, there's what to be improved. And of course, we have to be extremely vigilant about this issue. But for a second, let's be positive. The miracle of the preservation of Jewish identity through the preservation of Jewish marriage. It's not just something that the Maccabees fought to preserve. It's something actually that they had a watershed moment at that time. That's how he's describing it. Something that they accomplished that basically from that point on, something changed for the good. And I mean, tate mashma, I mean that in both ways. It changed for the good, meaning in a positive way, and for the good, forever. At that point, what the Maccabees accomplished in standing up against the lure of assimilation through intermarriage, that basically made it that the Jewish people would never succumb, would never be destroyed through the assimilation of intermarriage. That's basically what was accomplished at that time. And that's something we celebrate every year. Now, how do you write that story? How do you write that story? You can't write that story. You know why? Because that story is happening every time some college kid on campus is sitting in class and some girl asks him to borrow a pencil and he has to struggle with his identity and doing the right thing. That's not a story you could write. It's not a story you put in the Bible. It's not a story you could read from a Megillah in shul. It's a story that's happening right now. It's happening in thousands of places all over the world at this second, right now, this very second. So it's a story that can't even be written in a book. Such poetry here. The only way we can capture it is through the symbol of the glow of a flame. Words can't tell this story. The light of the menorah tells this story. It's gorgeous. Okay, let's finish it up here. Anyways, b'ha'aras ner, through the glow of a candle, shehu ha'ara zu, dizgalas kedushas hayasoid, whoa, shebechetzenius b'peil mamish. The candle represents the glowing, the light of Yesoid. Yesoid is connected to reproductive functioning. How Yesoid can shine and overcome in the realm of the superficial, in the realm of Chitzonius. Lies Meir, Gam bepnimius. And to cause not only that it should shine into the superficial realms, but then also permeate internally the hainu b'chol mine arabuvum, to basically saying to nullify any type of potential commingling. That's really what the menorah is all about. And this is much, much more. I mean, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. We read about, I'd say about 1/10 of it. But it's gorgeous stuff. Okay, anyways. All right, Freilich and Chanukah.